All right. I assume the board is accepting the agenda. All right, and anything else? All right, Libby, announcements?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded. We have a lot of vacancies coming up for committees, boards, and commissions for 2017. And there's a lot of information on the town website. The board will hold 2 public hearings to hear applications and then make final appointments on June 21st. So if people out there are interested in volunteering for any town opportunity, please go online and check them out. The water company's ongoing announcement about its Prospect Street area waterline project, which is still ongoing. Looks like there's lots of activity going on Prospect Street this week, so try to avoid that area. We're pleased to announce that this week, May 2nd through 8th, is Municipal Clerks Week, and there is a proclamation in your packet. If maybe one of you would...
I'm going to read it.
Read it?
Yeah, would you like to read it, Jim?
Whereas the office of the municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of the municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal services to all, whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community, whereas municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meeting of their state, province, county, and international professional organizations. Whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the municipal clerk, now therefore I, Don Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Board of Selectmen, do recognize the week of May 2nd through May 8th, 2017 as Municipal Clerk Week, and further extend appreciation to our municipal clerk, Catherine Flanagan Stover, and to all municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they serve.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I have one more thing that came in after the agenda was published, which is next Wednesday, Wednesday, May 17th at 10:30 a.m. in the training room upstairs of this building. Dr. Brian Howes of the UMass School for Marine Science and Technology, SMAST, will be giving the 2016 water quality update. It's hosted by the Natural Resources Department, and it will summarize water quality measurements from Nantucket Harbor, Mattucket Harbor, Long Pond, Hummock Pond, Myacomet Pond, and Sacagawea Pond. And just so the board knows, it's not a posted selectmen's meeting. You all are certainly invited to attend it. And tonight, we're going to be getting a little bit later in the agenda an overview of these results from the Natural Resources Coordinator. And town administration is working on a wider water quality initiatives update for you for your meeting on June 7th. And this will be a little bit of that as well. But this is one of the things that we've been focusing on the last 3-4 years.
All right, thank you. All right, we're at public comment. Anyone with a public comment that's not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. If anyone have any comments on minutes?
No, I reviewed them. They're looking
Okay. Those will be approved by consent. All right, Libby, on the contracts?
Thank you. We have a memorandum of understanding for town administration and the Council on Aging with Elder Services of Cape Cod and the Islands. This is an annual, there's no money exchanging, and it's an annual agreement for the Saltmarsh Senior Center to be used by Elder Services for its weekly nutrition programs. We have a service agreement for town administration with YSI Incorporated, $30,975. This is for water quality testing equipment that's used to transmit data gathered from the water quality testing, and we have a state grant for that, and Natural Resources Coordinator can answer any questions about that. We have an amendment to a professional services agreement for DPW with vector disease control. This adds to the current contract amount and extends the termination date of the contract And to reassure everybody, the mosquito control program is on track. There was a minor setback with the payment of some bills, but the work to address mosquito preparations for the summer is actively going on.
And I will say, real quick, is that it was very effective. My dad and Judy were not eaten alive out in Nantucket last year,
wow.
and they very much appreciated it.
Yeah.
We have gotten a lot of comments like that in the last 3 or 4 years, and certainly we're the last people who want to see that go backwards. So we're worked hard to get it back on track. Lastly, we have an amendment to professional services agreement for town administration with SMRT Architects. This will add up to $25,000 to that firm's current contract with the town to continue to review options for a new Our Island home facility, and we have an existing appropriation for that.
Great, thank you. All right, under consent, we have...
I just had
sorry.
I had a couple questions, but on the equipment used for transmit data gathered, but I'll defer, I'll wait till Jeff makes his presentation later.
Okay.
And you want a motion to approve those contracts?
please.
Is there a motion? Also move?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So moving on, we have gift acceptance consent items. We have one is a gift acceptance for Island and Home, Natural Resources Department, and we will send them a letter of thank you. And the other one is a resignation for the Council on Aging because the person is unable to get there. So seeing no one's opposing those will go through. Okay, now we're on the public hearing to consider the application for a new common victuals license for 02554.
Good evening. This is a common vicular public hearing for 02554 Cafe at 41 Main Street. We postponed from March 29th, at which time we did the liquor and entertainment licenses, which were approved, and we asked to postpone it because they still had some work to do as to kind of what they were going to do with the space and submit their plan review with health, which they have done. The name is changing, and they've done a DBA change, but that's going to be going through the lobby bar and market. So as we move forward, that will be the change. We have asked, generally in this case, when it's just a change of ownership, we do an administrative transfer, and I'm doing this specifically to make sure that there is a difference between the last licensee and this licensee due to some issues with how the last tenant left the building. So I want to make sure there's a clear distinction between who the license holders are. There's no objections to this from any departments. It would be the same conditions as normal with a license, is that it's conditional based on final approval of their plan review and all health and fire and building inspections before it's issued.
Okay, great. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here speaking on behalf of 02554? Okay. And seeing none, is there anyone speaking in opposition or would like to comment on this application? All
So
right.
there's no applicant representative?
Apparently not. I spoke to them
Okay.
today, so I'm
Okay.
a little surprised they're not here, but
Okay. All right.
yes.
I think we're moving along pretty quickly too.
Yeah.
So they may come
be,
running,
yes.
they may come in after, but
Yes.
I know. And I was here at 6:01. All right, well, I guess, so I'll close this public hearing on this and discussion of the board.
I don't have any comments.
No comments?
Nope.
Nope.
So
Do I have a motion?
I would move approval of this common vic license.
A second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And I'm recusing because they're going to be customers. Okay, or abstaining, there you go, there's the word. The next one is a public hearing to review complaints filed with the Nantucket Police Department regarding violation of terms and conditions of entertainment license held by Queequegs LLC, 6 Oak Street. All right?
Mr.
Chief?
Chairman, members of the board, we bring forward this complaint after receiving, in 2016, we received 6 complaints from residents around Queequegs Town, the Tree Bar, regarding noise. And this has been an ongoing situation for a number of years. And I got to be honest, it's not entirely just related just to this establishment. I refer to them as this establishment, even though it's 3 different kind of situations there. We've worked with the owner, Mr. Keene, on numerous occasions to get him to work it out with the neighbors or try to keep the music down to acceptable level. His entertainment license allows for two types of things. It allows for a radio and a compact disc player, and allows for indoor entertainment to be lightly amplified music and outdoor entertainment to be quiet background music only. And that was those provisions. Also, the hours of entertainment are from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m., 7 days a week, and with all entertainment to end by 1. The provisions of that license in 2017 today were the same as what was in effect in 2016. So what brings us here today, though, is 3 complaints that we received in particular. The first one on January 27th, 2017. Now, let me just preface this. I'm going to kind of summarize the various complaints. I do have the police officers that wrote these reports present if you have any specific questions that I'm not able to answer for you. But on January 27th, 2017, which I believe was a Friday, we responded at 11:19 p.m. to a report of loud music coming from Town Restaurant. They believed the music was possibly outside of the entertainment license, and the reporting party said, when the officer arrived, they heard music coming from a speaker outside, which was on the outdoor steps. It actually was just setting on the steps. And they said the music was quite loud. They went in, they talked to Mr. John Keene himself. He showed them their license, and they asked him to turn it down or turn it off, in which he apparently complied. No further assistance was needed that night. They report that present was about 50 patrons inside the residence, and they also had a DJ playing music, which is not a specific provision that's allowed by their license. Then the following night, on January 28th, again at 11:15 or 11:12, excuse me, they responded up, the same officer, for a report of music coming from an outdoor speaker. When they arrived at town, the officer had his going into town, not the restaurant, but downtown. The officer had his cruiser window down and was able to hear the music at the beginning of South Water Street. So on his arrival, he observed the speaker on the top step again, same as the previous night, and this particular night, the music was louder than the previous night. He again spoke to John Keene, who stated he'd shut the outdoor speaker off. Again, he produced his entertainment license, which again reflected he was only allowed to have on the outdoors, he was only allowed to have light background music. They explained to him the problems they were having and that he would, and the possible bylaw violation. Again, inside the restaurant, they observed a DJ playing and about 40 to 50 people inside. They did conduct further checks throughout the night, and the music stayed off outdoors at that point. And then again on February 18th at 11:30 at night, we responded up to Town Restaurant, where we had a report of noise complaint coming from town. Upon arrival, the officer said the restaurant was very loud and the music could be heard from Broad Street. The officers approached the restaurant, opened the door. The establishment appeared to be at capacity with patrons, and the music was very loud. As a matter of fact, in talking to the officer, she described it as she tried to talk to the bartender but couldn't even carry on a conversation. The music was so loud inside the establishment. These are the 3 incidents, most recent incidents that we have on record to bring forward. And we've received numerous complaints over the years, mostly from an immediate neighbor. And I got to be honest with you, in most cases, Mr. Keene or his management was able to, or was cooperative in turning the music down or off. But these particular incidents seem to be escalating above and beyond what we've had in the past. If you have any specific questions, I have the 2 officers present about those. I believe also there's at least one of the complainants that's in the audience that's willing to speak about how it impacted him.
Okay, great.
Tonight.
Thank you. We'll probably have you back. And I'll hand it over to Dawn. You want to
Sure.
take over?
So I'm assuming we're at the point where we'll open it for public comment.
Yes.
Robert? Just introduce yourself for the record.
Robert Young, good evening. Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I made those complaints. My family and I, now currently I have a home on Easy Street, and which is a modern building with good insulation. I built it on purpose to keep it as soundproof as I possibly could. And what has been happening is at 11 o'clock at night, when the restaurant people are gone and it turns into a bar, that neighborhood, and it's not just town and Queequegs, but it's in competition in the summertime with Ventuno and the Rosencrown. And who can play the louder music to attract a bar crowd? Because after about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, most of the adults, consider myself one of them, I'm at home in bed, and I'm not downtown looking for a party. And that's what happens downtown in this particular neighborhood. It's gotten worse. Last summer, I never complained. I'm not a complainer, but when it starts happening in January and February, it's kind of like, okay, where are we going with this? So I have some simple comments. You know, I understand that these people own a license for entertainment. The license says quiet background music. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is you ask somebody not to do it on a Friday night, and then they do it again on Saturday night. And I have a disconnect with that. And I don't know where we want to go and what we want to be as a town and how we want to represent our community to the people who come here and visit. I think you've all seen the video, and I think that speaks for itself. And as the officer might have, I think he said he could hear it from Broad Street. He could hear it down the end of South Water Street. I can hear it on Easy Street coming through storm windows and the best insulation you can get in the middle of the wintertime. And it's just, I just think that's wrong. And this isn't it's not, again, it's not just about one restaurant. It's about the idea of an entertainment license and how do you want to give those out? And how do you want to police it? Do you want Chief Bittman's guys down there at 11 or 12 or 1 in the morning asking people to turn down the music? I mean, they've got probably more important things to do. So my questions are, what happens? How do you police it? Who's going to police it? If this continues, what's going to be the response? And ultimately, is this what you want for our community? And so those are 3 questions. I ask any one of you to address those, if you would, because I think it's really important to understand exactly where we're headed. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else care to speak?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Michael Wilson on behalf of Mr. Keene and Ms. Montgomery, who are the principals behind the Town Queequeg Restaurant. And with them is their new manager, Chief Operating Officer, Taryn Marquez. I would like an opportunity just to briefly address what the chief has brought up, and Mr. Keene would like an opportunity to address the board directly now, if that's acceptable.
Good evening, members of the board. You all know me, I'm John Keane. Carol and myself run the restaurants, and we've been doing so for about 25 years. We've lived on the island for 25 years. The restaurants have been going for about 16, 17 years. It's not our intent to set out and become a problem to the town, or to Chief Hitman, or to any of our neighbours. That's not what we're trying to do. This winter we were unfortunate in that, as Robert said, it's a combination of all restaurants downtown, and noise and tourism and people wanting to have a place to have an event. What transpired this year was every restaurant on the island closed. downtown, Queequeg's in town, were the only restaurants open for 6 weeks solid. Out of town, the Chicken Box was closed, the Pie Pizza was closed, Sea Grill was closed. We were the only venue. And as a result of being the only venue, we got the focus. And I apologize for that. It wasn't the intent. And we do not set out to be problematic to our neighbours, and we want to work with the community. We work very hard about trying to be a year-round establishment that provides food, a place to go, a place to socialise, and a place to have fun. As I said, it becomes difficult when you're the only place open and you have to manage everybody else's problems. And we had meetings, many of them in November and December, knowing that everywhere was closing, and we addressed it and put security on. Our staff were all aware of it, and we tried our best, and apparently it was still wrong. For that, we apologize. We humbly apologize. We're not here to be problems in the community. We're here to help the community. Kitty Murta's has been there for about 16, 17 years. We do the Meals on Wheels program. We do the Saltmarsh Centre senior meals program every day. We do consider ourselves very much part of the community. We employ about 40 people year-round. At least 10, 12 of those people have been with us for almost 20 years. It's strange that in 16 years of being open downtown, where we have had noise complaints, but they were noise complaints, not violations. Anytime a police officer comes by or a cruiser comes by, we always cooperate 100%. I don't believe there's any police officer that could ever say that we were uncooperative or negative in any fashion or form. We recognize the fact that we have one neighbour that complains four times a night when they're here on island. They're only here for basically Figawi, 4th of July, Labour Day weekend. We don't turn our music on when they're in town. I meet them every morning when they arrive. We are friendly, we talk and everything, but they do call and complain. And they do name us, even though our music's not on. There's a big problem in downtown, and that is you've got lots of people in a core district where the sound and noise and voices of everybody that wants to come out and play and revel and have a great time and enjoy Nantucket, and we try and provide a service where it's safe to do that, some people are going to be upset. And I agree with Robert. What happened in January was out of order. I also want to just state for the record, it's kind of, we weren't told we were in violation on the 27th. So what happened on the 28th was basically the same offence. And on the 18th of February, there were no speakers outside. We'd already changed all that. It was just we had a large group of people. We were the only restaurant open. So on that note, I'd like to apologize. We're just trying to do business and provide a service, and we don't want to be on the wrong side of the law or have people upset. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a few points I'd like to make. I did go through the reports that Chief Pittman provided and that Ms. Baxter provided. And I would note, and I'd ask the board to note, that each time in the reports when the officers, and I know they're here, went down to address the issue, they were able to speak to the manager or to Mr. Keene, and the reports note that they had no further problem as the chief reports each night. I think Mr. Keene has certainly identified and agrees with Mr. Young that the January 27th, 28th, and February 18th were not appropriate uses of the indoor entertainment license where the speaker was focused outside. With respect to the license itself and what's before the board, there is an opportunity for the board to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I'd ask you to consider as a board to give Mr. Keene an opportunity to prove that to his neighbors and to the board and to the community. Consider a warning at this point. The outdoor tree bar, I think it's safe to say, was not any aspect of the violations from this January. The reports all note that the patrons were all inside. It's the speaker that was focused outside. That will not happen again, and we would like the opportunity to prove that through the continued use of the lightly amplified music. It's not accurate to say he's going to be using a stereo or a radio and a CD player, and we are going to amend or address what the application says for the renewal, or if it needs to be modified this year to make it, whether it's iPod or streamed music service, to be consistent with what's actually there. I don't think anybody has CD players anymore, but we will address the actual ramifications of what the entertainment license permits. And I think if you give Mr. Keene an opportunity, you will see over the next 6 months that there will be no further uses that were like they were this January or February. And if there's any questions from the members of the community or from the board for any of us, we would happily try to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll close the public hearing.
I
What's-
just had a couple
Jim?
of questions of the applicant. Could we do that?
Okay.
So I just, we heard from Chief Pittman there was a DJ in one evening, and your entertainment license is restricted to lightly amplified music. Is it? Would you consider a DJ lightly amplified?
The DJ in case that we're talking about is basically a patron that comes in every Saturday night. He has had his own bar in the past. He uses our house system, and on Fridays and Saturdays are obviously busier. Monday through Friday, the bartender does the same job. They pick out 3 songs or 4 songs in advance, they play, then they change the genre, they monitor it to see what way the crowd is going. It was a chore that got passed over to, here, pick the next song. It's not a situation, I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, it's not a situation where there's a stage, a microphone, fog machines and all the rest of that kind of thing. He's standing in a corner picking the next song.
Did he bring in any of his own equipment?
He would bring his own computer, his own laptop, which was basically the same as any electronic device that you would use to store your song list on.
Okay. Did you have another question, Joe?
I did. Again, we heard from Chief Pittman that the officer on one occasion had difficulty speaking to the bartender because of the noise level. And again, would you consider that, that fact consistent with lightly amplified music?
Honestly, no. But it does get loud, and as I said earlier on, we were the only establishment open for any type of nightlife at all. And if you've 10 people in a room and you can hear the music just above your conversation level, and you have 60 people in a room and the music is still just above that level, there's going to be 2 different levels. And then secondly, it's kind of like, well, if the bartender and the police officer couldn't have a conversation, how does the bartender do their job and serve drink, because they can't hear what the customers are asking for? So it's kind of like a no-win situation.
I have a question. Excuse me. I have a question on. This is probably going to come up later too, and tonight. what technically is a DJ?
Right.
Like what's the parameters?
Right. So a disc jockey with a live person being a disc jockey, and there have been other occasions where there's disc jockeys at town, is live entertainment. That gets into fire regulations and safety regulations, which I spoke with the fire department. They are not regulated for. Sprinkler system, other things come into play with that. A live person performing, whatever they're doing, is live entertainment. They do not have a license for that. It's lightly amplified music. Yes, it says CD and radio. Clearly, we can update that to iPod or streaming service, but that is pre-recorded music through the house sound system is what that refers to. And amplification is, if we're talking about additional amplification, we're talking about adding speakers, adding external speakers. So the disc jockey isn't even part of the conversation in the sense that it is a violation. It's live entertainment. So I think whatever happens, any conditions, they are not permitted for live entertainment this point forward, regardless, without any sort of amendment to the license and probably update to the system.
So it's a person coming in,
Person coming in, yes, because
anything.
they consider it in the state, and regulations consider it live entertainment. People dance, whatever it is, it gets into those regulations, and they aren't permitted for that this time.
And then if there's a playlist that they start at 5 p.m. and it goes to 1 a.m. and no one touches it,
Yeah.
that's not.
A lot of places do that, yeah, with your iPad, whatever you're going to do, and have a playlist. You get a DJ in there with this computer, you move some tables around, it becomes a whole different situation, which they've had in the past. So that just needs to be clear that they do not have a license for that in the future.
Is there, there must be a distinction between when someone has like someone come in and just play an acoustic guitar compared to it becoming a nightclub. Isn't the nightclub really
the
where
nightclub
the fire...
designation? Correct. It's going to be occupancy. It's going to have other sorts of requirements with it. They would have to have other sort of building requirements with that. So, but it is live entertainment. The acoustic guitar would be live entertainment too, as well, even though it's not amplified.
So in that
yeah.
respect, they would also have to have a sprinkler system.
Correct,
Okay.
in certain situations. So currently, and I did check in with the fire department, they are not licensed for live entertainment of that type. So a playlist is fine, but bringing someone in, equipment, and doing a performance really is not allowed.
Is it the entertainment, or is it the number of people that triggers the sprinkler systems?
It tends to be the number of people or the building. They'd have to kind of determine what they're going to do, where it was positioned.
If it's a multi-use building?
Correct. Multi-use becomes another issue too as well.
Okay.
Based on those reports, the occupancy was probably getting pushed in those cases.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I guess just, really to Mr. Young's point, we should have a conversation, the community or this board, about that whole, the noise level of not only this establishment, but all of them, because it really does, to some people that is offensive, and to some people it's an attraction. So it's I know when I come out of the Dreamland after a late movie, and this was during that period, I heard a lot of noise coming from that establishment and music. So it's a concern to me.
All right. Well,
I have another question. What do we normally do what's usually the punishment for someone if they have a DJ and they're not supposed to have a DJ? What have we done in the past?
We haven't done anything in the past because we've usually just have the policy is to bring 3 verified complaints, doesn't come to you, and usually it's taken care of or it's resolved some other way. But really your only authority here is either to modify, suspend, or revoke a license, in this case, once it's been established.
And that license, Chief, because there's 3 entities, so it would just be for the outside music, regardless of which.
Well, I mean,
it is?
let's just say, for instance, you wanted to amend it, and you would just amend the portion that was of concern to you. For instance, if it's the indoor music that was too loud, you would just tell them no indoor music, or elevator music or something. I don't know how you describe it. Outdoors, if it's too loud, too late, you can make it cut off earlier. That kind of thing, that kind of modification. Just some provision in the license is what you'd have to modify. like I said, the other option is you could suspend them for a defined period of time, or you could, which would mean no entertainment. Doesn't mean they'd close, because that's controlled more by the liquor license than it is by the entertainment. And a revocation would mean, until either granted another one, but they would lose the license and could have no entertainment as long as they maintained a common vicular or alcoholic beverage license.
I have one more question. So in the packet, there was from 2013 to now, there was 31 violations. Roughly, how many of those are from the same?
A vast majority of them. I mean, probably, you could probably say 80, 90% of them were from the same. And in the summer. And what I could tell from reading the reports was it looks like the documented cases we have are all either the immediate neighbor, a couple blocks away, and then there was a complaint from one of the competitors. I guess their music was louder than theirs or something, but and that was a couple of years ago. So those were the only 4 various actual people. But to be fair to them, like I said, their license allows music till 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's just the level of music, and to some extent, that's a subjective decision. And what, is loud to Officer Mason here might be outrageous to me, so different officers going in have different standards. But we got to try to come up with some kind of a description that would adequately describe what they can do there that we can all understand. That's the challenge. We really need some entertainment regulations that are specific to this.
That was my next question, which maybe is a different subject, or maybe it's a something for now.
I have a question. Didn't we at one point measure noise? Wasn't there noise meters? And
there's a bylaw that provides decibels, but it's impossible to do because you can't separate the ambient noise from the noise coming from the establishment. And you can hear, like Mr. Young would probably tell you, what bothers them is the boom, ba-da-boom, boom, boom, ba-da-boom, boom, boom, and that doesn't show up on the noise meters. Especially if a car goes by, that car is 10 times louder than that boomity boom boom, but they don't hear the cars. So it's really communities that have regulations that establish decibel levels will tell you the only people happy with that are the performers, because they never get in trouble for having too loud of music, because it's impossible to measure.
So, some of my thoughts. I'm just concerned with, continuous complaints and police resources having to be spent on it. That being said, I also, really appreciate that Nantucket's a place where people want to be downtown and have a good time, and the town. People who live in town do have to think of it a little bit more as though they're living sort of in the city, and that there will be some noises, but there's a certain level where it goes over the top, and there's a reason that we have a 10 o'clock noise bylaw across the board, that then some of these licenses are able to go beyond. I'm really concerned about the DJ because that does bring up safety issues, and if that's a direction that you want to go in, you need to work towards that and have the proper licensing, or just stop doing it. The music outside, I think, is something we need to talk about across the board for all of these places that stay open till 1 o'clock and are allowed to have outside music, if it's becoming too much of a nuisance for people who live downtown. And there might be a more reasonable time just to stop the outside stuff, like maybe 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, I'm not sure, but maybe 1 o'clock's a little bit too late. The music content was a real concern for me. I don't think we talked about that, but I did see the video, and I don't know exactly how we put that into a license, but there are kids who are going to be coming out of that Dreamland Theater after a late movie and having a lot of swear words coming out of the speakers at a restaurant is not an ideal situation. So, I mean, I think that these particular owners have been longstanding parts of the community. They, I think, are hearing what we have to say. I'd like to give it a chance, but in regard to probably the DJ portion, but I kind of think we should dial back the outside music from 1 o'clock on their license.
I personally think we need to take some action tonight to modify somehow their license. Certainly, we know that the DJ is a violation, so there's consequences for that. I'm happy if it's something to do with, outside. I don't, it's very difficult when you define light amplified music. So it could either be, curtailment of that, or bring the time back. So.
Madam Chair, could I
Yes,
just
do you
make
have a suggestion?
three brief points? Yes, and I do have a suggestion. I've looked at the spreadsheet, and it does provide a lot of information. 9 of those complaints are unfounded, according to the licensing authority or to whoever compiled the information. And each and every other one of those complaints shows compliance, immediate compliance with the police officer having to go. And we understand that that is not where the town needs to be spending the resources and sending officers on patrol to address noise complaints. But 9 being unfounded and each and every other one being complied with goes a long way to show the nature of those 2 pages of information on that spreadsheet. The chief's correct that the licensing authority, which is your body here, may suspend, modify, or revoke. It doesn't say shall, and that's the law of Chapter 140. So it's not incumbent upon you to revoke or suspend the license, and you may modify it. And to Mr. Kelly's point, these violations in 2017, which we have the policy here, which is why we're before the board, not one of them pertained to the music that the tree bar, which is the lightly amplified music, is permitted to use. The tree bar was never part of the January or February events. It was closed. It was the inside. It was the inappropriate use of the volume button inside. And I don't want to split hairs about bringing in
that's
a
important.
It was the speaker outside.
Right. It was the speaker that the door was open. Right. It wasn't the other aspect of the license that allowed lightly amplified music at the tree bar, because there were no patrons there and the tree bar was closed. So it's the inside portion of the entertainment license that this license holder offended. And so if the board is inclined to act, I would ask that you consider possibly, I had a suggestion to put them on a warning with a probation, since you're not required to modify, suspend, or revoke the license. You may, but you're not required to. And I think as you point out, you have a very captive audience here who understands that their livelihood at this establishment is in large part dependent on the ability to have any type of music in the background. It's not someplace that would probably do well, like any other place would do well, with just a common victualler license and no music. So we'd ask you to not revoke the entertainment license. With respect to modifying the entertainment license, as the license is issued, it doesn't need to be modified. They need to comply, and they will. It's a volume issue, and I think you will find from this day moving forward that you will not have a volume issue at the license location, which is Queequeg's and Town. And I don't want to split hairs about the DJ. It was not an employee, and it was somebody, a third party, selecting the music. But it does need to be differentiated from the scenario that you might imagine, which would be 2 turntables and machines and lights. The bartenders would typically pick music off of an iPod or an iPad, as this third party did. It was a laptop computer. So I would ask the board to consider a warning and a modification, or an admonition to the license holder that the interior portion of that license needs to be honored. and that the volume needs to be what's allowed and no more. Ask the board to consider a motion along those lines.
Jim?
I would disagree with Mr. Wilson's point that having officers respond to a call of loud music or noise and having them having the proprietor or the manager turn the music down is being compliant with this license. It shouldn't have been that loud to begin with.
Madam Chair, I would only point to the spreadsheet that
Let's
it
not do
shows
a back and
compliance
forth.
versus non-compliance.
Let's not do it back and
I didn't.
forth. Jason?
Oh,
I'm not so much concerned with the summer ones. It is an issue, but if it's coming from mainly one resident that's nearby in the summer, I understand. That's not enough for me to revoke a license or suspend it. The winter one has more weight to me, and then, the DJ, we have to, I think, consider it. But in the summer, we'd have to go back to having a bigger policy. I think if we're going to, pull back to 10 or something in the summer, I think we need to think about overall policy, not just this, for the summer. The winter thing is an issue. Just wanted to say that.
yeah. I kind of see what you're saying, and I mostly agree, although I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing the growth of the downtown nightlife business. This was not an issue 15 years ago, or as big an issue 15 years ago when the police were downtown and there was a presence. There was someone there and they took care of it. This is becoming an issue now. There's more people who want to be outside, and they want to be outside fully entertained. And and I think those are the questions as a board we're going to have to deal with. Now, I don't think that, I don't think we can place all of that on these guys or on this particular situation. I think that that's something we're going to have to do from a policy standpoint. I do think that, I'm not willing to revoke or suspend. I would be willing to consider a slight modification. I'm slightly offended about the splitting hairs bit because we all know what's coming. It's summer and people are going to want to be outside and they're going to want to be loud. So let's not, I know I know what we're heading into. And everyone was going to want to be loud, and I've been down there and I've seen the battling DJs between the 3 or 4 different businesses. And I think that that's something we need to get a hold of. I think somehow, whether it's, stopping that at a certain time at night outside, or if we give a warning now and something happens, it's revoked entirely. I mean, there has to be some teeth to this at some point, but I don't think, so I don't have the answer. I'm putting out sort of my sense of it. And we have to be, especially on the outskirts, like, these guys are dead in the center, and I can see a little bit more leeway. But as you get out to the outskirts, to the edges, the same rules can't apply. When you get down to the, down near Washington Street, one of the complaints I didn't even realize was happening is there's some of the DJ music on top of the Whaling Museum a lot of the summer. And it's blasting out across, where I grew up. And all those people are complaining that thing's thumping away, in the middle of the summer. Now, just because someone hasn't complained about it doesn't mean it isn't happening, And so we have to sort of look at this globally. So, anyway.
So what are some options to modification?
Can we put anything in the license about explicit content in music?
It's free speech. That's what.
Because that's one of my biggest issues.
Sorry, Don. I agree with you, and that's not the type of music I like to play. And if you don't have somebody that actually monitors your music, you play a genre. It plays a list. Mm-hmm. And every now and again, you'll get a song that will come in like that. And
are you using like Pandora or something like that?
Pandora, all those type of channels, yes. That they sort of predict what your next song is going to be. And it's very hard to censor it, but there are adult versions and then there's censored versions of every song. But if you're not careful, it just comes up. And it is truly a style of music that I don't like and don't allow my bartenders to play. and I address it hardly. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taryn Marquez. I'm the new manager of the 3 establishments. I just want to say, because I don't think that they've clarified, that we were saddened to actually see the video, and we have put a new music system in place and have instructed all of our staff to only play clean versions of songs. So that won't be an issue moving forward.
And if I could just briefly interject, Mr. Fee, I certainly didn't mean my comment to suggest the board was splitting hairs. I was saying that I was splitting hairs by not calling the third party a DJ. I was trying to show that you can have an employee select a song off of an electronic device and a third party selecting a song off of an electronic device. It was not the 2 turntable DJ type entertainment, and that's what I wanted the board to be clear was not going on. So I apologize if I wasn't clear.
What do you all want to do?
Amy, could we ask Amy what some options might be in terms of
The last time, I was just thinking the last time we did have this come up, I think 2 years ago with Lobster Trap, where they were having outdoor problems. There were 3 complaints, if you recall, and the license at that time was at till 11 p.m. and it was brought back to 10 p.m. For that. So, the options are to pull back timing-wise. The DJ part is definitely no disc jockey, and any violation of that in the future could be for suspension. And there have been full DJs in the past at town, so it's not even just this one incident we're referring to. So that's completely out. You can do pull back on time. You can put probably stricter warnings should any violations of these problems happen again in the next 12 months, that there will be even more severe restrictions placed on it. So time-wise is one. Obviously, doors and windows. I know Rose and Crown, some of the others have that restriction on their license at 10 p.m. Doors and windows are closed. Obviously, we have the tree bar, so you can't close the tree bar doors. But most of those restaurants in that area have that. Station 21, Rose and Crown, doors and windows closed at 10. And then timing-wise, outside certainly, or inside can be, and with the caveat that any further violations this year will result in either further suspension or restrictions.
Violations, not complaints. Like, so what, I'm thinking like if we put something up there, this happens one more time.
Correct.
And then the neighbor says, all right, gotcha, here. Like, how does that work?
Well, when we talk about verified complaints, we're talking about when a police report is made and
Okay.
a police officer comes and verifies that, or myself in some sort of inspection as we go through with occupancy inspections or anything of that sort. And we document that.
Because there were complaints in there that weren't verified once the officer got there. So
Correct.
that's
Once
an
the officer
example.
got there, something was turned down, and that would be a non-verified complaint.
do we say if there's a complaint and the officer has to ask the establishment to turn their music down, that's a violation right there? It's hard
Correct.
it's hard, yeah.
And that's going to, can be a judgment call and seeing
Right.
that. And we're getting into that time period where there will be other restaurants open at the time, clearly.
Right.
So that's the decision. If because of these violations, they're sanctioned with earlier shutdown time outside, or a warning with any further violations or complaints, or documentation by us in inspections that results in either further pulling the music or whatever it is you choose to do in the future.
I'd like to see something where the doors and windows have to be closed at 10.
Okay.
There's no outdoor speakers after Tree Bar closes for the season. And that if there's another violation, then, that they've been warned that
Right.
there will be further action.
Yep.
Does that seem reasonable?
I would second that.
I guess I'd like to see more of a time modification.
I feel like we have to have a broader discussion about everyone's outdoor entertainment licenses. It would be really punitive to do it to one person if it's not going to be an across-the-board policy, that like everyone downtown has to shut off their music at midnight outside or something like that.
They'll just walk next door.
Yeah, it's not,
Right.
it feels unfair that one business can have it outside till 1 and the business next door can't.
I don't know if, well,
But
yeah.
I think that we should bringing that back as a discussion, because as more and more people have this outdoor seating and have music, it's getting loud. It's getting more and more city-like. So that would be my proposal.
And then no DJ, a friendly amendment, no DJ unless that's amended.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
that's-
I mean, I thought it's already there,
All right.
so.
I'll second that.
So if you just repeat it.
Yeah.
So all of the doors and windows will be closed at 10, and there will be no outdoor music or speakers after Tree Bar closes for the season. And just that they're getting a warning that there will be some further action if there's more complaints, more violations, excuse me.
Do we need to decide what that action is now?
Yeah.
Do we need to put parameters? No?
Or maybe we say,
It just comes
maybe
back
we
here.
say, will
Correct.
result in a temporary suspension or something. I mean, I think there's still I don't see what those actions will do to keep the complaints coming and the officers coming down and asking them to turn it down. But I could
You
be
don't
wrong.
have to set, I don't believe at this time, what the sanctions will be, that further sanctions will be, and they can be brought in on one complaint.
Yeah, 'cause they're
Some of the
not free.
licenses, because you want to discuss what that certain complaint is and see the severity of it.
Okay.
So you don't have to do that.
Yeah, and any complaint, they're here.
So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So,
Okay, all those in favor of that?
I
Aye.
All right.
Okay, unanimous, thank you.
All right, thanks.
I would like
Thanks
to
for
bring
your
it back
time.
to have a conversation before the summer gets in swing about the whole issue of the noise in that area. Not so much from the response from neighbors, but just, what's happening culturally to our community in that area, so.
Libby,
And
how,
I think we need to do that.
We
And I-
do.
And I think we need to invite some of the people, make sure that we reach out to some of the people that are impacted. from
I
both
think
sides.
I did get a message from David Silva about the Restaurant Association offering to be involved in
that's
any
great.
further discussion.
and what would that be? Is that bylaws? How fast does that happen? Is it just regulations? If we were to change something?
Well, I think it's going to be up to the board as to what that would be, but already we're at the beginning of May, and we're talking about something for summer, so that means staff's going to have to scramble around and try to work on this if that's what you want to do. I'm going to made a note to myself to pull some minutes from 3 or 4 years ago when the board was having this exact same discussion, and it never really concluded into much of a policy or regulations or anything like that. So I'll pull that so you can see what the discussion was about. And I don't know quite what you'd want us to do. I'm all for a discussion about it because this has been an issue for a while, but it's going to take some time to get regulations and stakeholders in to discuss and things like that.
When do the entertainment license, December, right?
Yes.
That they come up for renewal. So I think maybe it's a discussion we start at some point
Yeah.
during the summer
Right.
and
And I
just
think
sort of
maybe
try to
use-
think about it so that we can have if we're going to make any changes, it's an across-the-board policy when people come in for the renewals.
And perhaps this summer is the summer we do monitoring and, and maybe.
See how
I don't
things
know
go.
but just it's more of a data collection time.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. It's a management issue at this point to monitor on a
Yeah.
nightly basis at various times and to mark everything and then be able to come back with it. I mean, I think that's, I don't think that's too onerous. If we've got people downtown anyway, let's try to set that up.
So would it make sense to discuss this maybe late August, early September after
My
some
thought
more
was that we
information's
would have
compiled?
some template where we would collect data during this summer and then come back, and I'm not sure what all those parameters are, then come back in the fall to see what that data tells us. And I don't know if it's more surveillance on the part of the more random checks was talked about. I'm not sure what those are. Maybe we have to discuss that at a further point, but.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to have a little internal discussion about it, but I think we're going to know just what kind of data you want
Well, you-
and how.
Maybe you could suggest some, so.
Well, we could, why don't we come back to
Okay.
you on that? Because
Great.
it's also going to depend on, it might sound easy to collect the data, but the officers are downtown doing lots of other things, and I don't think they're going to be listening for stuff like loud music.
Okay, we'll talk about it more.
You don't need a vote or
Thank-
anything.
Thank you.
Not yet.
No, I hear what you're saying, so we'll try to figure something out and come back.
And I think the data might
Thanks for
come-
coming.
John might have the data. If you're still walking around at 9 or 10 at night, I know a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
he would go door to door and look and check every window. You may know what's going on better than any of
Yeah,
us.
You can be
We may come
the
back to-
neighborhood watchman. You can.
We may come back for the for in a
Well,
positive manner.
I would definitely be glad to help.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we? We're down to town manager's report.
Okay, our auditor is here, Tony Roselli, and he met with the audit committee today about the FY16 audit, and that was a much more detailed meeting than what he's going to go through with you all tonight, which is an overview of the fiscal 16 audit.
Thank you, Libby. We met with the audit committee this morning, had a very good conversation, went through the management letter and the 16 audit. So I'm here to share the results tonight with the Board of Selectmen. So, reserve balances. The first thing I'd like to talk about is just the town's wealth, not wealth, but its trend economically. And it's trending positively as it has since 2009. You can see here that the reserve balances have increased from about 7.5 to around 17.5 million. So this is a good trend. What's particularly nice about this is when I look at your tax capacity, you're still well under the tax limit. So you're allowing the taxpayers to benefit, and you're also able to put aside reserves. So that's a really nice place to be. And hopefully that continues into 17. And per my conversations with the finance office, it should be very similar or slightly higher in 17. Okay, what we also looked at is how this all compares to the metrics. So reserve ratio is the amount of your reserves divided by your total expenses. And the town is around 26% when we do that math. The rating agencies, in order to get a Tier 1 ranking on this particular metric, look for 15%, so you're well above that. And the state average is somewhere around 8 or 9%, so you're well above the state average. So again, the town's showing some really impressive figures in that regard. And please feel free to ask questions if you have any as we go. So we've talked about a lot of this. I don't have to repeat a lot, but the town was rewarded with a AA+ from Standard & Poor, who visited the island for the first time, and continued to get a AA1 with Moody's. This is one step below the AAA, and hopefully at some point the town can get to that AAA. I think the town's getting close. So, and this basically puts Nantucket in the top 15% of communities in the state of Mass with respect to investment appeal. Okay, so before we get into the findings and recommendations, we'll go through some informational items. And I felt there were 3 items that I wanted to communicate to finance. One is the Municipal Modernization Act. And there's a lot of areas in this particular act that went into effect in August of 16 that are going to make things a lot more efficient, a lot less red tape, and move things along a lot smoothly. We've gone over some of the areas that would affect the town, betterments, consolidating your abatement accounts, and several others. So the town is familiar with this. They are implementing those that apply. So that's good news. The OPEB liability is an accounting standard. It's not an extra cost or an extra charge that's required by the statutes. The town is contributing annually to OPEB, which is a good thing, and that's a voluntary contribution. Like I said, it's not required, unlike the pension liability, which is required. The liabilities around $88.8 million. That or a similar amount will be coming on the books in fiscal 18. So again, this was just a reminder for the finance department that this is a liability that they're going to have to get a calculation on and bring onto the books. There's some single audit changes that are going into effect, and basically that's for any community that receives federal grants greater than $750,000, which Nantucket qualifies. You have to have a certain internal control framework that needs to be implemented. So that is something that finance is working on this summer. So hopefully for the 17 audit, some of this will already be addressed or will be in the discovery stage of being addressed, possibly in fiscal 18. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there was some significant deficiencies that came up as part of the audit. So we have regular findings, and then we have what's called significant deficiencies. So I put this slide first. We'll get to some of the regular findings on the next slide. But what happened in finance is there was a lot of turnover. There were individuals that were involved in key areas that weren't around at the end of the year to do the close. There was some time constraints in getting reports ready for the bond rating visit from Standard & Poor's. And this led to more errors than what would normally occur in the closing process. So we ended up calling this a significant deficiency. We specifically went through the errors with the finance department. There's a plan in place. We discussed it in significant detail this morning as the audit committee viewed this as a serious matter, and that plan should be put in place. So that was discussed very comprehensively this morning, and it's something that we'll continue to monitor and hope that at the end of 17 we'll see some resolution in the closing process.
A question on that, if I can?
Yes.
Is one of the recommendations that they close it a month earlier so there's adequate review time? Is that?
One of the issues was that because S&P was scheduled to come in on October 4th due to how your bonds were going to mature, October 4th is really tight because you've got to let 6 weeks go by at the end of the year just to get your warrants and everything into the system. So now you've got from the middle of August really to the middle of September last year to close. There's really no way you can get it done faster than that. What the finance has done is last year they implemented a pre-close process where every month they do a close just to practice. That's still being perfected and it's still being monitored. I think once that really gains traction, it's going to make this close process a lot.
So you're closing 1 month at the end instead of closing all 12?
Yeah, what you're doing is, at the end of February, in mid-March, you're closing February. In mid-April, you're closing March. So I think it's a great strategy. It allows the people to learn the process and make the errors in the interim, because we don't audit those interim closes, and then make a nice close at the end of the year, because the end of the year is the most important one. That's the one that goes to DOR. It's the one that goes to the rating agencies. So there is, like I said, there are a number of wheels in motion regarding the plan on how to rectify that.
No, that's a great way to do it. Ryan, that's...
Would you mind sharing what you shared with the audit committee in terms of the trajectory of improvements over the last several years? You made a comment.
I was going to do that. Yes.
Okay.
So our first audit was 13, and the first thing I did in the due diligence process was review the prior audits. So I reviewed like 2009 to 2012, and back in those days, there were material weaknesses and significant deficiencies that dwarf what's going on here. So if you look at this over a 5-year period, almost like the stock market, you've got a nice trajectory, then you got a little bump in the road, and then another trajectory. That's what it looks like is happening here. So hopefully in 17, we can continue on that positive curve and not continue to come down. And what I've seen, I've been here all week, and what I've seen, I'm fairly confident that this can be corrected. Okay, the federal withholding process was an issue. With the IRS, the payments were, instead of being made the next day, which is required due to the size of your payroll, the payments weren't sent to the IRS or wired to the IRS until 2 or 3 or 4 days later. It resulted in a number of notices, penalties, and a whole bunch of issues with the IRS. The penalties have been abated. The town the town actually didn't have to pay anything, and all penalties, interest, everything got abated through an appeals process. The process has been corrected. I've viewed it for a period since then, so it's been corrected. And one of the issues here was the IRS was sending out periodic notices, but it wasn't getting to the finance director's desk. So somewhere in the process, it was the notices were being lost, so it couldn't be addressed more timely, and so it ended up being a 4-quarter process problem instead of a 1-quarter problem. So that, I'm fairly confident, has been taken care of and fixed at this point. Any questions? Next slide. Okay, payroll reconciliation procedure. Again, this has been fixed. This really dealt with having a process in place to reconcile your withholding accounts every month, and that's fixed. We don't really need to speak much about that, but there were some small variances going back and forth between what was really owed and what was on the ledger, and again, that has been fixed. That's now being reconciled every month. Ambulance receivable write-off policy. When the new chief came in, there was a large amount of receivables written off all at once, and which leads me to believe that these should have been written off over a period of time every year. So what we've recommended is that, I think the conclusion we reached this morning was that twice a year to review the list, because what happens is you have a patient, the patient doesn't know if insurance is going to cover it, or if there's a medical write-off, some other sort of issue, or the patient dies. And if it stays on the list, it's really no good. So I think with the new chief and with the finance department, they're going to work together to come up with some sort of a policy that says, okay, when receivables meet these certain criterias, we will write them off. That way it doesn't balloon up to a large amount. And then,
sorry.
Yep, I've got a couple of things there. And then just from the prior management letter, there were 4 items that were still outstanding that we also talked about this morning. Old outstanding receivables. If we go back, there's receivables, motor vehicle, boat, personal property, so on and so forth, that go back to the 1990s. And I had made a recommendation that the likelihood of collecting those is very low. So at some point, the town should analyze them, decide if they're collectible, and then write them off. The finance department has discussed this with the state, so there is a mechanism in place of how to clean this up. And the amount of this is probably around $100,000. It's not a lot of money, but there's just a lot of rows with receivable balances. So in my opinion, it just cleans up the general ledger and makes the whole close process easier and just makes things more efficient. Cash reconciliation process has been an issue for the last 6 or 7 management letters, and that's finally getting some traction. I expect it to be fixed by the end of 2017. The town brought in a consultant who's worked with the cash reconciliation, who's teaching the new treasurer the most efficient way to perform this, so I expect that to be corrected at the end of fiscal 2017. Payroll and DPW reviews. Back in 2014, the town engaged us to review the payroll process and the DPW department, and we came up with about 10-page report on each. So it wasn't something we expected to be fixed overnight. Little by little, things have been fixed on it. It's at the point where there are a handful of items still left that are in process, I believe, to be fixed early 2018 or by the end of 2017. And then stagnant special revenue accounts are those accounts that have not had any activity for a number of years. So we pointed that out to the town, And basically, it's department heads that don't know. They've gotten gifts years ago that it might have been a different department head. It turned over. The gift is still on the book. They have it available to spend. Or the expense got put to the general fund by accident. So what we've said is to do an analysis of this. Right now, there's a list. There's an identification of what it was supposed to be, what happened to it, and I believe the finance department will be going over that with the town manager and making recommendations on how to resolve these by the end of fiscal 17. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, I'm free to answer them.
As Tony mentioned, the audit committee met this morning. We went into detail, not only the management letter that came from the auditor, but also management's response. We, in particular, looked at recommendations from prior years to make sure that those are on track and moving forward. And we even compared them to, prior years before that. We made a couple recommendations in terms of how some of the enterprise funds are reported in the year-end audit. And we had a comment about the timeliness of reporting to the audit committee. But I can tell the board that we're very confident, not only in the quality and of the accuracy of the report, but also management's responses.
Yeah, I was here 15 years ago or so, and the improvement we made from then till now is astounding. It really is. It's very positive.
You were on the audit committee, right?
No, but I read it all.
Okay.
I'm one of the crazy people that reads every word. But it was, what we've done is pretty amazing, the town has done. And Brian and Libby should be thanked for it.
I should also mention that the town did receive an award for its CAFA, and it has put in a CAFA for 16, so we'll hopefully be hearing on that shortly, and hopefully that's another award. And that's just an accreditation, basically, as to what you're saying on the improvements that have occurred since 2012 and 13.
Yeah, the things that jumped out at me that I think we should still do, we should continue to fund the OPEB stuff. We started doing $250,000 or $500,000 when I was on the finance committee. We've continued to follow that up. I think that's important with what's coming down the road to try to get ahead of that as much as we can, especially when times are good. And then I think it was page 29, we were talking about expenses. We're up $4.4 million, but $3 million of it was health and pensions. Police department was $1.5 million. So there are some things that, if things are not this rosy, could put us, could make it more difficult. So I don't think we can assume that things are going to stay like this forever. So I think being defensive, is important. And then the only question I had, there was one, when we look, there was on page 81, we're talking about pay-as-you-go on health insurance, and we pay as we go. Do we ever I know we do it from the insurance side, but from the audit side, do we sensitivity test for what's going to happen as people age out? When we audit it, are we auditing to make sure that if we have a high number of retirees that are all going to go on the books, and we're providing their insurance, but also providing the people who they replace their insurance, do we sort of test what the impact will be?
That's the OPEB study.
Right, okay.
That goes through that. So, they do sensitivity analysis and predictability analysis. So, I think that goes out about 10 or 15 years into the future.
Okay.
So they can kind of tell you what they think things will be if you continue at this path. If you start fully funding your OPEB, which I think you're a little bit a ways from doing that, then those numbers would change. But based on what you're funding, they do a predictability analysis of those years. So that is something that's part of the
by
plan.
age, like we're looking at age and where they are. Okay. I'm set.
Anything else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next, excuse me. The next item is the 2016 water quality testing update, which we're going to hear from Natural Resources Coordinator. And again, the more detailed review will be given on May 17th here in this room upstairs at 10:30 by Brian House.
Correct. Again, this is Jeff Carlson. I'm the Natural Resources Coordinator. I haven't been here since Jason's been on the board, so welcome aboard. Kind of disappointed that Rita's not here to get everyone all at once. But a real brief summary. I know we provided this to your packet, and I'm happy to take questions as we go. But we're continuing kind of a similar program in 2017 with some enhancements and some things that we're doing. But real quickly, I'll run through kind of the 6 major water bodies that we're looking at. And if you could scroll down just a little bit to the bigger chart. Right, so what we're kind of looking at here, these are the 6 major water bodies that we look at as a town. The good news is that the general trend that we're seeing within Nantucket and Nantucket Harbors, Long Pond and Myacomet Pond, are trends with nitrogen that are going down. So we're getting closer to our goal in those. More specifically, in better news, Long Pond was actually at its Sentinel station below its TMDL threshold for the 3rd consecutive year, which is going to lead us to this year, hopefully doing some surveys more related to the restoration of the benthic infauna that are there, so the little critters that are growing in the muck, and see that they're coming back and good diversity that's there, and hopefully the vegetation that should be in that pond starting to come back as well. So we'll be kind of taking the next step on that water body for data collection purposes in that area. Nantucket Harbor also, good news, Hither Creek last year was below for the first time at the Sentinel station for Nantucket Harbor. That's good. Nantucket Harbor was down in general. There were 2 stations that are still somewhat of concern. Pulpus Harbor is still, to be fair, kind of a mess. The head of the harbor and the boat basin area actually showed an increase. So that's a decrease in water quality and an increase in nitrogen. But overall, the harbor is down. Myacomet Pond, we've started to evaluate Myacomet Pond, not necessarily with nitrogen in totality, but we've started to look at phosphorus in that pond as well. That's more of a limiting nutrient there as it's a freshwater system. Both of those are holding steady, if not declining. The kind of the 2 bad news is for the water bodies that we have are Hummock Pond is declined in some areas, and Sacajah Pond has substantially declined for a number of different reasons. Some good news and some help a little bit on the way, and I don't want to steal all of the thunder from the big water quality presentation, but not only with our regular work with SMAST, but through work with the Land Council and the Pond Coalition, we did what they call a 604B study that we just released out to the public that really focused on especially phosphorus within Hummock and Myacomet Pond, and got a lot of really good information that's allowing us to kind of refine our program and to look at some different parameters we haven't looked at before to get a better idea of what's happening with those water bodies. And more exciting than that, I guess, and we'll be back in front of the board with goals from this, with Rob McNeil coming on board as the director of the DPW, and Roberto at the Board of Health in our department. We've all been kind of collaborating together to take more of an adaptive management approach to the goals and objectives and the management suggestions that we'll have to the board. And the first step to that is going to be a lot of reevaluating some of these informational models and systems and plugging in data that we've been collecting to try to update those and get a better picture of what our management has done, and to make better decisions about what we're doing and to enhance what data we're getting, so we don't have questions about what may or may not be involved. We can try to close all of our informational gaps. So that's coming soon. Again, I think we'll be back hopefully sometime in the near future with more. This is what we'd like to be doing going forward outside of our sampling, and some real hard answers for suggestions we have for real management activities, whether it's, better stormwater controls or looking at, alternative septic areas or sewering or all of those options, to be back with better information and information that we vetted internally before we come to you, so we can come with you with the best information we have. But I'm happy to take any questions on kind of a really brief summary.
Jim?
I just had a question on the contract. Could you talk more about the high-frequency sampling apparatus
Sure.
SONDS, and how you might use that? And
Sure. So the program that we're going to be running, it's a program that we're trying out in Nantucket Harbor first. And what those instruments are, the SOND units, they collect basic water quality parameters on a 15-minute interval, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we can go and collect that data really whenever we want. The really good part about it is our water quality program now essentially runs on us going out, collecting a sample on a specific day at a specific time, getting that processed, and then using that. The problem that we're not seeing is we're not seeing the daily fluctuations and daily cycles of very important characteristics like dissolved oxygen. So these meters collect that data, and we can go back and we can really see, and a really good example would be in the head of the harbor where we've had rust tide blooms for the last couple of years that are pretty significant. We can really see what's happening with the oxygen in the head of the harbor and how that may be impairing our eelgrass and shellfish and fish in that area on a 15-minute interval for long durations of time. So it really helps us fill in the gaps for what's really happening to supplement our full suite of data that we're collecting.
Is it measuring pollutants and things on that same time frame? If like there's a discharge, will it?
No, so what it looks for is those are looking for dissolved oxygen, salinity, conductivity, pH, two different kinds of chlorophyll. But what that does show us is if there is a big nutrient input that comes in. So if you had a boat that discharged its black water tank, you might be able to see how the oxygen responds for a big phytoplankton bloom or something that's there within the chlorophyll and within the dissolved oxygen. So you can kind of, if there's an event that takes place, see how those really basic parameters are affected within that, and you can kind of trace back to sources or see it.
So you can infer it, but it's not measuring exactly what you're
right.
inferring.
It helps us pinpoint areas that we should be looking more closely for. That may be something that we haven't missed as a direct source or something that's come in, but it'll be really nice to see how the 3 meters that are going to be set up through the harbor, how that data comes back to help us fill in our gap for knowing what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
I just had a question. Dave Franzuno, I think, has talked about the impact of the jetties and flushing,
Sure.
the harbor. Do you have any idea when we might see any impact of that? Or?
Well, we're definitely seeing with the jetties being primarily done, we've definitely seen an increase in current throughout the channel that's there. And with that increase in current that comes in is we're getting greater flushing, especially within the lower basin. It hasn't probably really affected the upper reaches, so the head of the harbor or Pulpus Harbor or that area. But in areas where the boat basin showed some decline, an increase in circulation could certainly help with that area. But the instruments that we'll be installing and plus some enhanced testing in that area will really be able to quantify the effect of those jetties and those things going forward to better understand that effect.
One thing I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the models that we're working off of were they're putting the jetties in and they're putting some of the factors in, but they're not putting factors like more boats weren't in the model, or more homes or more runoff wasn't in the model. So you look and say, geez, if you sewer this, and if you do the jetties and sewer, we might not have to do anything. Except at the same time, we're putting the water qualities under a lot more pressure as we add more people in more houses and more of everything else. So we have to, you have to find a way to do everything.
Absolutely.
And I think people want to think that, we'll do the jetties and everything will be fine. It would be if we weren't adding a single home or, but that's not realistic. That's not what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're really starting to focus it now on updating those models and updating the assumptions that were involved. And also, with any program, whether it's water quality or something terrestrial or all of it, if you don't update your data to what the current parameters are, you're not going to be using the best information. And when those were made, we were using the best information at the time we had. And now we need to update those and kind of move forward using the best information. And we've collected a lot of data since then, and we've also identified areas we're missing and trying to fill in to update those so we can make better decisions. Because I totally agree, it's not a situation where there's a single answer or a silver bullet. It's a contribution of all the factors that are going in, and we really need to get a handle and control all of our inputs to really see the benefits and our water quality improving.
We can't control what's coming from the atmosphere, which is pretty significant. So we have to
Correct.
attack it with any means
Absolutely.
that we have.
Absolutely. Anytime we can control, I mean, in a perfect world, we remove all of our man-made inputs from the systems, and that's not realistic to believe, but I think we can do a better job with the ones we can control. Absolutely.
And I remember being here 3 or 4 years ago, and Zacatcha was a wonderful story, and here we are with a couple of bad openings, and we're back to.
Yeah, it's a program, the openings on a whole, that we're really kind of reevaluating because as we've taken a little better handle and moved through it, and I said it as early as this morning, was I don't like a management strategy where you're crossing your fingers at some point. It's a great tool to have, and it's something that's useful, but without controlling our inputs that are still going into the water body, you're not going to get the full effect that you need.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much
so we'll
for
look forward,
coming
and hopefully
tonight.
everyone can make it for the 17th, and then we'll be back in front of you shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Libby? Back to you.
The next item is the monthly town management activity report, and I generally kind of go through this, but not go through every little item. This is just highlights from what we've been working on over the past month and maybe earlier than that. We have union negotiations underway with our union contracts that expire on June 30th, 2017, and we're hoping to make some level of progress there, but it's sort of slow going, and we're going to be giving the board an update in executive session shortly. As we know, the DPW director has been hired. We've restructured a bit with procurement. We were having a lot of difficulty trying to hire a procurement officer, so we've designated the finance director as the chief procurement officer, and we've hired an assistant, and that person is hired and is going to be going for a training shortly, and we're working to boost up a kind of a procurement work group that we've got going with different town staff who are certified or are in the process of getting certified as mass public purchasing officials. We have the housing specialist and public outreach coordinator positions being advertised now, and as we know, longtime water company manager Bob Gardner has retired. A lot of different meetings going on, ranging from department head weekly and monthly meetings to island home related sewer project meetings are twice a month or so. Follow-up meeting with a Highline about parking for the summer fast ferry shuttle service that they're doing. We had a preseason beach meeting yesterday, and we're going to be coming to the board in the next couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I think right before Memorial Day is what we decided, to give you all an overview of beach sort of readiness for the 2017 season. We met with the Nantucket Pond Coalition President, Bob Williams, today, with some staff and others about pond management. Lot of projects going on. Hummock Pond Road, I should rather say Milk Street Extension Bike Path Project, the fire station, First Way, Brant Point Boathouse is hopefully coming to some level of a conclusion. Six Fairgrounds Housing, the Island Home, e-permitting, and then just other types of, not building so much things, but other different projects. Sidewalk improvement project, water quality update, cable TV license renewal. I mentioned that, I think, last week or recently. We're going to be giving you all an update, an overview of what that renewal process looks like in the next month or so. We also are still doing follow-up from the 2017 annual town meeting. We're getting the Academy Hill lease back on track. And that's the main highlights.
Everybody good?
They're good.
Any committee reports?
Do you want to speak on we went to the Tesla meeting. They were here with Lauren about, and they're going to be applying potentially with the town for $1.25 million for battery storage potentially. And it would be people, so they would basically cut the cost of the batteries that would be installed on a house or a business. They'd like to do it in concert with shingles. They'd like to do a project or two of shingles that actually look like asphalt shingles, and they are supposed to be more efficient, and they look a lot better. There were some HGC members there, and while they're hesitant, they also, realize this might be a better alternative. So that's sort of slowly moving forward, and we may, as a board, may want to give a letter of support to the idea in general, because it would bring back, some good things for the island. It also may help us avoid having the third cable for a longer period, because what would happen is the energy would be stored in batteries throughout the island, ideally 500 or more of them, and they would be able to give their energy back into the grid at peak. And so that would be the way that it would, would help. The money would come hopefully from the state and from National Grid, because it would be helping both entities. Especially would help National Grid because they wouldn't have to put more capacity online. They wouldn't have to build more stuff. So it's very interesting. There's a lot to it, but it was well worth attending.
Okay. I kept making the wrong announcement about the CPC's annual forum. It is not here, as it has been for many years. It is this year at the African Meeting House, and it is at 4 o'clock on May 16th. And people should come. It's a great forum. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.